Now we're going to the session 2 paper presentations. We're having 2 speakers. So we are having first Vyushti. After their 2 presentations, we'll have a Q&A section also. So Vyushti Johari has recently graduated from the Psychology and Spirituality at Columbia University Teachers College. She enjoys researching the intersectionality of quantum physics, psychology, and spirituality, and exploring implications on consciousness. She hopes to expand the field of psychology to incorporate post-materialist perspectives into mainstream practice and dialogue. To achieve this goal, she's currently developing a psycho-spiritual protocol for coaches and therapists. And her talk is named Understanding Human Consciousness Through a Post-Materialist Lens. So the floor is yours. Thank you, Vyushti. She's an NPN also. Sorry to have missed that.
Thank you, Natalia, for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here, and especially coming from Vanessa's workshop. I was quite nervous before doing it. So Louise, thank you for inviting her to do another practice. I think that was really helpful. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Great. So yes, I'm Vyushti, and today I'm going to talk about understanding consciousness from a post-materialist lens. So before I really get into it, I'm going to talk about who I am and why I'm interested in this. So in this context, first and foremost, I'm a psychology student because I was always fascinated by the brain and human functioning. So I decided to study psychology to really understand it. I took it in high school. I did it as one of my majors in undergrad. Then I worked in neuropsychology before coming to my master's in Columbia University doing psychology and spirituality. And the reason I chose this program is because I thought that traditional psychology was missing the point a little bit. And the reason I say that is because of my own journey with mental health. I had clinical depression for close to a decade, and I saw counselors, clinical psychologists, and psychiatrists, but all to no avail. And that's when I started awakening to my spirituality. And that started shifting my perspective and relationship to my experience with depression. So first, I started seeing it as developmental. So Dr. Lisa Miller, who is the founder of the Spirituality Mind Body Institute at Columbia, she found that 2/3 of depression in adolescence is developmental. So and it stems from this hunger for transcendental awareness. And this perspective also shifted my understanding of depression because I saw it as an initiation. And what does that mean? So this is an excerpt from the book, The Time Falling Bodies Take to Light. And it says, in the experience of initiation, the individual moves into a tomb, goes into a deep trance in which he separates his etheric and astral bodies from the physical body, and then in this bardo state goes through a series of confrontations and trials. Since the physical body is really a filter which shuts out the psychic realms, when one is out of the body, one is out of the protection of the wall. Whatever one thinks is immediately experienced, nightmare or beatific vision. If the journey through the subconscious is successful, the initiate can return to his physical body. If the confrontation with terror is too much, then the individual becomes psychotic, dies, or is rescued, but is refused admission to the mysteries. So one such mystery that I encountered after this initiation experience was tarot. I was extremely skeptical of tarot initially. I thought it was a whole load of nonsense until I experienced it, and I was quite fascinated by it. So I had to learn it. And that's when I started channeling consciousness, and I started accessing different streams, which I found was very interesting. There was this one experience where I was reading for someone, and I was cognitively aware of what one of the cards was and what I was going to say. But when I actually came to reading that card, I said something completely different. And that led me to believe that maybe consciousness isn't necessarily produced by the brain, but it's accessed. So this is a quote by Rumi about consciousness that I love. He says, consciousness sleeps in minerals, dreams in plants, wakes up in animals, and becomes self-aware in humans. So coming to the science of consciousness, David Chalmers defined the easy and hard problems of consciousness research, where the easy problems refer to the functions, the behaviors, the objective, and the measurable, whereas the hard problems deal with the experiential, phenomenal, subjective, and intuitive aspects. So the hard problem really is related to the experience or the subjective awareness of different states of consciousness. So for instance, why does joy feel the way it does, or why does fear feel another way? Whereas the easy problem really deals with the neural mechanisms that underlie conscious experience. And the explanatory gap is where these theories fall short, and both the easy and hard problems have this explanatory gap. So in the easy problem, it would be, why do specific brain states correspond to particular feelings? And in the hard problem, it would be what it's like to be you, or what it's like to experience the color red. So I'm more interested in the hard problem of consciousness. But before we get into that, we need to understand what consciousness is. So these are some of the different dimensions of consciousness, or the way consciousness is understood. So first is cognitive capacity, which is our ability to introspect or share our mental state. Then is awakeness. So when we see people in a coma or sleeping, we say that they're unconscious. So being awake is considered conscious. Then is our ability to focus our attention or control our behavior. Then is knowingness, which is basically to be conscious of something, to be aware of something. And then is qualia, which I find the most interesting of these. And basically what qualia is a mental state. It's a mental state, and it's considered conscious if it has some sort of qualitative feel or experience. And a lot of people who deal with the hard problem of consciousness focus on qualia. So it really is the phenomenal subjective experience of consciousness. And there are many theories of consciousness that attempt to explain it from one or more of these dimensions. But I'm not going to get into the theories. Instead, I'm going to look at some of the models of consciousness. So first is the reductionist or materialist model, where the material world is considered primary, and its main focus is the neural correlates of consciousness. So going back to the easy problem of consciousness. And consciousness is seen as emergent. So it's really a byproduct of neuronal firing. But here the explanatory gap would be, how does consciousness arise from matter? So the next model then is consciousness is seen as primary, which basically states that consciousness is the basic structure of the universe. It is considered fundamental and not a byproduct of the brain, like the reductionist model states. But because consciousness is primary, the physical world and the brain are a manifestation of consciousness, which leads to the explanatory gap of, how does matter arise from consciousness? The third model that I'm looking at is the dualistic model, which distinguishes the mind and the brain as separate entities. And the mind is this non-physical entity that deals with consciousness, whereas the brain is a physical instrument. And this model really explores how the mind and brain interact with one another. And here the explanatory gap is, how do the objective and subjective emerge together? The field model of consciousness, I feel, kind of touches upon the previous three. It says cosmic consciousness underpins all conscious experience, where consciousness is really seen as a field and the brain is a filter mechanism. So there isn't a mind-brain distinction, but rather individual consciousness is seen as a part of universal consciousness. Dr. Peter Fenwick beautifully describes, there is a transcendent reality over and above that of the ordinary everyday world. That mind is extended and consciousness is not limited to the brain. The transcendent mind is universal and the individual mind has access to it. Another another perspective to understand consciousness is an Eastern perspective of Trika Tantra. And this philosophy really looks at the structure of reality and consciousness along with our experience of both. And I'm going to talk about it from a top-down perspective, but as humans, it's a bottom-up experience. So right on top, we have Parabhairava, which is the entirety of the universe. It is the primordial element, and it's what powers energy and consciousness. Shiva and Shakti right underneath is pure cosmic consciousness, which is Shiva, and Shakti, which is pure energy. And one can't exist without the other, and they're bridged by what's called spanda. And spanda is this vibrationless vibration that underlies everything. And I think a couple of speakers before me touched upon this, but that's essentially the foundation of string theory. And when Shiva and Shakti are contracted, it results in the manifested universe or the divine play. And to understand this, we need to understand the tattvas. So the tattvas constitute the elements of reality that make up the human experience. There are 36 tattvas, and the three that I have mentioned here relate to pure subjective reality. So before we get to Shiva, Shakti, and Parabhairava, we need to understand this. So I'm going to talk about it from a bottom-up perspective now. So first, it's Shuddha Vidya Tattva, which is us fluctuating in duality. Then we move to Ishvara Tattva, where we see the universe as a projection of us. And then we move to Sadashiva Tattva, which is where we recognize us as the universe. And before we get to these upper tattvas, we need to understand Maya and Kanchakas. So Maya in Trika Tantra is really treated with love and reverence. She is the divine architect that governs physical reality and the laws of physics. And so you really can't transcend Maya, but you're invited to be a part of it and play with it. And the Kanchakas are these bondages that are placed on Purusha, which is the center of cosmic consciousness. And these Kanchakas are placed when the universal becomes the individual. So Maya and Kanchakas are placed on Purusha, which is, like I said, the center of cosmic consciousness. And this results in the entanglement with Prakriti, which is the source of manifested consciousness. And once we understand these limitations, we stop wanting to be and we start being. And this allows us to move to these upper tattvas that I had mentioned. And the way we do that is by understanding the antakaranas. And the antakaranas are basically the inner organs of cognition. So we have mind, which is manas, which deals with calculation. We have buddhi, which is pure intellect and discernment. We have chitta, which stores memories from impressions. And we have ahamkara, which is ego. And this is really important for us to understand consciousness because it's not really understood from a Western psychology perspective of ego, but rather it's condensed consciousness in you form or I form. So every single cell in the universe has ahamkara because consciousness is condensed in everything. And then this leads us to the holographic model. And I really find that this marries both the Eastern and the Western perspectives. So the first thing this model does is that it distinguishes between individual and transpersonal consciousness, where individual consciousness is personal consciousness. It filters data that's relevant to our survival from all the information that is available to us. And it is likened to the Western materialist perspective. And transpersonal consciousness is the experience of unity, of complete oneness of all. And it can be likened to the Eastern post-materialist perspective. And in this model, the structure of the universe is seen as holographic, where David Bohm explained the implicate and explicate order. And here the explicate order has an analyzable multiplicity, which is similar to individual consciousness. But then there's a deeper implicate order of the universe of undivided wholeness, which is similar to transpersonal consciousness. So to understand this a little clearer, there is the analogy of the blind men and the elephant, where different blind men are touching different parts of the elephant and saying it's a wall, it's a tree, it's a fan. And that can be seen as the explicit order, but when we experience the elephant as a whole, that can be seen as the implicate order. And then resonance. I'm not going to read this excerpt, but I'm going to paraphrase and add my bit to it. So when we get out of the mind and we slow it down through meditation, and I'd add self-reflection, dance, play, grounding, and maybe even what Vanessa just guided us through, we don't get caught up in this rapid storm of thoughts and images, and we get a chance to resonate with and therefore access the implicate order or cosmic consciousness. And the brain can receive and communicate with this field. So with that understanding, we can also see the heart as the center of consciousness. So the electrical signals in the heart are 60 times greater than that of the brain, and the heart's electromagnetic field is 5,000 times stronger and can be detected up to 6 feet away from the body. And the heart also detects stimulus before the brain, and it impacts brain and body activity. And the process of this is similar to the quantum nature of brain processing and consciousness as proposed by Carl Pribram and David Bohm. And then HRV and magnetic field. So heart rate variability is basically the interval between each heartbeat. And there's a direct mathematical relationship between heart rate variability and information that is encoded in the magnetic field. And then this brings up ideas of coherence and quantum interaction. And this is further emphasized by findings that show that we synchronize with universal frequencies. So geomagnetic and solar influences impact heart rate variability patterns, and this in turn affect human behavior and consciousness. In a really interesting study done by McCready et al., they found that the heart is coupled to a field of energy of information that is beyond space-time. And in this experiment, they showed that the body and the brain process a future event before it happens, so kind of like a precognitive experience, and the heart receives this information before the brain does. So what do we do with this information, or what is the point of knowing all of this? I want to leave you with a few invitations to consider. You don't have to accept them. But first is that you are the explicit order and you are a part of the field, and the field is in you. You can access the field and it moves through you. Science helps provide a framework to know consciousness, but to truly understand it, we have to feel it. So play, dance, don't try to intellectualize it, and try living it. And then understanding consciousness can be seen as an archetypal journey from duality to trinity, where duality is really this foundation of our understanding and categorization of the universe. It helps us comprehend all these complex energies and how they interplay with one another. And once we move from seeing these tensions between opposites, East versus West, materialism versus post-materialism, science versus spirituality, and start seeing them as ends on a spectrum, then a third point can emerge of synthesis, which both transcend and include duality. And one of the mothers of the new paradigm navigators, Dr. Louise Livingstone, succinctly articulates the sentiment. She says, an integrated epistemology that embraces both the rational knowledge of scientific empiricism and inner knowledge may well provide a different way of approaching these global challenges, creating new episodes and new understanding. And this, I believe, is the leading edge of consciousness, an invitation to synthesize by giving up dogma and adopting the archetype of the divine child who embraces curiosity and play to explore the new. So thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. If you wish, you can connect with me. Here is my email, my website, and my podcast that I created with a fellow new paradigm navigator, Jasmine Shah. And here we really tried to access the field from the heart. And yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Vyushti, for such a wonderful presentation. It's amazing. Thank you so much.